The sound of paper tearing cut through the silence of Robert Mitchell's corner office like a blade. Lily watched, frozen in her chair, as her boss ripped her doctor's note cleanly down the middle. Then again, and again. Until the medical recommendation from Dr. Patricia Chen, the document that clearly stated she needed 2 weeks of medical leave for a severe lupus flare-up, became nothing more than confetti scattered across his mahogany desk. "People like you," Robert said, leaning back in his leather chair with that familiar smirk she'd learned to dread, "don't get sick. You get lazy." Lily was 34 years old, and in that moment, sitting in that office on the 22nd floor of the Sterling and Associates headquarters in downtown Chicago, she realized something she'd been trying to ignore for months. Her boss wasn't just difficult, he was dangerous. And what he'd just done wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. "My name is Lily Chen, and 6 months ago, I was the director of client relations at one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the Midwest. I'd worked there for 8 years, climbing from an entry-level analyst position to managing a team of 12 people. I'd brought in over $15 million in new business in the last 2 years alone. My performance reviews were immaculate. My client retention rate was 98%. I was good at my job. No, I was exceptional at it. But none of that mattered to Robert Mitchell. He'd been brought in as VP of Operations 9 months earlier. Golden boy from New York with an Ivy League pedigree and connections to the firm's biggest investors. Within weeks, he'd made it clear that he had a problem with me. Not with my work, with me. The comments started small. "Lily, maybe let the men handle this presentation. Clients prefer a certain authority." Or, "Are you sure you're up for the Tokyo trip? It's a long flight, and you know how you people get jet-lagged." Each remark was delivered with a smile, wrapped in plausible deniability, designed to make me question whether I'd heard what I thought I'd heard. But I had, and I documented everything. Every comment, every email, every witness. I'd kept records because something in my gut told me this man was building towards something bigger. I just didn't know how big until today. "Robert," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That was a legitimate medical document from a licensed physician. I have lupus. I'm having a flare-up that's affecting my kidneys. I need medical leave." He picked up one of the torn pieces of paper, examined it like it was trash, then dropped it back on his desk. "You know what I think, Lily? I think you're taking advantage of the system. I think you're using this supposed condition as an excuse to slack off while the rest of us carry your weight." Supposed condition? Like 8 years of medical records were fiction. Like the days I'd come to work with my hands so swollen I could barely type weren't real. Like the times I'd worked through exhaustion so severe I'd slept in my car during lunch breaks rather than go home weren't proof of my dedication. "I have documentation going back years," I said quietly. "This isn't new. Heather has all my medical files on record." "Our works for me now," Robert smiled. "Well, not directly. But let's just say we have an understanding. You want to take 2 weeks off. Fine. Clean out your desk. Because when you come back, you won't have a job." The threat hung in the air between us. "You can't fire me for taking medical leave," I said. "That's illegal." "Oh, I won't fire you for taking leave." Robert's smile widened. "I'll fire you for performance issues. For attitude problems. For not being a team player. Take your pick. I've been documenting your failures for months now. Failures I knew didn't exist. But I also knew that Robert had been building a paper trail, false reports, altered performance reviews, fabricated complaints. I'd seen the signs. I'd even tried to warn HR, but my concerns had been dismissed as paranoia. What Robert didn't know was that I'd been building my own paper trail. A real one. "I'll take the 2 weeks," I said, standing up slowly. My legs felt weak, my body screaming at me to rest, but I refused to let him see me stumble. "And when I come back, we can discuss this further." Robert laughed. Actually laughed. "You're tougher than you look. I'll give you that. Most people would have cried by now, but sure, take your 2 weeks. Go rest. Go do whatever it is you do. And when you come back..." He paused, his eyes cold and predatory. "Well, we'll see if there's still a place for you here." I walked out of that office with my head high, even though my hands were shaking. Even though I wanted to scream. even though every step felt like walking through fire because my joints were inflamed and my body was betraying me. But I didn't break. Not in front of him. Not where he could see. Because Robert Mitchell had made a critical mistake. He assumed I was helpless. He assumed I was alone. He assumed that ripping up my doctor's note and threatening my job would break me into submission. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for months. I had recordings. I had emails. I had witnesses who were tired of watching him abuse his power. And most importantly, I had a lawyer, my college roommate Sarah, who specialized in employment discrimination and had been waiting for me to give her the green light. As I packed my things that afternoon, my team watching in confused silence, some fighting back tears, I thought about everything I'd sacrificed for this company. The late nights, the missed family gatherings, the relationships I'd neglected, the health issues I'd pushed through because I believed dedication would be rewarded. Robert Mitchell was about to learn that the quiet ones, the ones who document everything and wait for the right moment, are the most dangerous enemies to make. I just needed 2 weeks to get my health stable. 2 weeks to finalize my evidence. 2 weeks to prepare for war. And when I came back, Robert Mitchell's perfect life was going to fall apart piece by piece. If this story is resonating with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel because what happens next will show you exactly how the tables turn when someone underestimates the wrong person. The 2 weeks I spent on medical leave were supposed to be about healing. Instead, they became a masterclass in psychological warfare. Day 3 of my absence, I received an email from Robert, not to check on my health, not to wish me well, but to inform me that my team was being temporarily reassigned to other departments due to operational restructuring. My team. The people I'd trained. The analysts I'd mentored from their first day. Gone, redistributed like office supplies. I called my colleague James, one of my senior analysts who'd been with me for 4 years. "What's happening over there?" His voice was careful, measured. Like he was afraid someone might be listening. "Lily, it's bad. Robert called a meeting the day after you left. He told everyone you'd abandoned your responsibilities. That you were unreliable. That the company couldn't afford to have leaders who disappeared without warning. I didn't disappear. I took medical leave. With documentation. He destroyed the narrative before anyone could question it. And Lily," James paused. "He promoted Derek Chun to acting director of client relations. Derek, my cousin. The same Derek who'd asked me for a job 2 years ago when he'd been unemployed and desperate. The same Derek whose resume I'd personally walked to HR. The same Derek who'd sat at my dinner table, eaten my food, and promised he'd always have my back. He took my job. He took the opportunity Robert offered. I'm sorry, Lily. Some of us tried to speak up, but Robert made it clear that anyone who defended you would be next on the chopping block. People have mortgages. Kids. They're scared. I understood fear. I didn't understand betrayal from family. That night, I sat in my apartment, a modest 1-bedroom in Lincoln Park that I'd scraped together every penny to afford, and I cried. Not gentle tears. The kind of crying that comes from your gut, from the place where you store all the pain you've been too strong to acknowledge. My lupus flare-up was getting worse. Not better. The stress wasn't helping. My doctor had been clear. I needed rest, reduced stress, and time for the medication to work. Instead, I was lying awake at 2 a.m., my phone lighting up with emails from Robert, each one more aggressive than the last. "Lily, we need the Wellington account passwords immediately. Lily, where are the Q3 projections? Your team can't find them. Lily, your absence is costing the company money. When are you planning to return and fix this mess you created?" Mess I created. Like I'd asked to get sick. Like I'd chosen to have an autoimmune disease that was slowly destroying my body from the inside out. But here's what Robert didn't know about me. I grew up in a family that immigrated to the US with nothing. My parents worked 3 jobs between them to put me through state college. My mother cleaned houses during the day and worked as a hospital aide at night. My father drove a taxi for 16-hour shifts. They taught me that survival isn't about never getting knocked down, it's about getting back up every single time. So I documented everything, every email, every text, every voicemail. I forwarded copies to my personal account. I saved screenshots. I built a timeline. And I called Sarah. Sarah Kim had been my roommate at Northwestern. She'd gone on to become one of the most aggressive employment lawyers in Chicago. She'd been telling me for months that Robert's behavior crossed legal lines, but I'd wanted to handle it internally. I'd believed in the system. I'd believed that doing good work and following the rules would protect me. I'd been naive. "Tell me everything," Sarah said when I showed up at her office on day 7 of my medical leave. I was wearing sunglasses to hide the butterfly rash spreading across my face, one of the visible symptoms of lupus that I usually manage to conceal with makeup. But I was too tired to care anymore. I laid out everything. The discriminatory comments. The destroyed medical documentation. The threats. The hostile work environment. The family betrayal. Sarah's expression grew darker with each revelation. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said 5 words that changed everything. "We're going to destroy him." "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "I just want my job back. I want to be treated fairly. Lily." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "Robert Mitchell isn't going to treat you fairly. Men like him don't change. They escalate. And right now, while you're out sick, he's building a case to fire you the moment you return. You think taking your team was the end? That was just the beginning." She was right. I knew she was right. "What do we do?" I asked. "First, you go back to work on day 15, exactly when your medical leave ends. Not a day early, not a day late. You show up, you document everything, and you wait. Second, I file a complaint with the EEOC. Third, we gather more evidence. And fourth," she smiled, "we make sure Robert Mitchell never does this to anyone else again." On day 14, I received a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a photo of my office. Empty. Completely cleared out. My desk, my files, my nameplate gone. Just bare walls and vacant space. Below the photo, a message. "Thought you'd want to see your new workspace. See you tomorrow." Robert Mitchell had given away my office. After 8 years of building my career, after millions of dollars in revenue I'd generated, after countless sacrifices, I'd been erased like I'd never existed. But attached to that text was something Robert hadn't intended to send. A screenshot, probably forwarded by mistake, of an email chain between him and Derek. "Make sure everything is ready for tomorrow. When she shows up, I want her to understand exactly where she stands now. The bathroom cleaning assignment should send the right message. Let's see how proud she is after a few days of that bathroom cleaning assignment." He wasn't just taking my job. He was planning to humiliate me, to break me, to make me quit so he wouldn't have to fire me and risk a lawsuit. I stared at that message for a long time, and then I did something I hadn't done in 2 weeks. I smiled, because Robert Mitchell had just handed me evidence of premeditated harassment, proof of his intent. A smoking gun in text form, and he had no idea I had it. The next morning, I got dressed in my best suit. I did my makeup carefully, covering the rash. I pulled my hair back. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. A fighter. When I walked into Sterling and Associates on day 15, ready to face whatever Robert had planned, I had no idea just how far he was willing to go to destroy me. But I was about to find out. The receptionist's face went pale when I stepped off the elevator. "Miss Chun," she stammered. I didn't expect you back so soon. My medical leave ended today, Maria. Right on schedule." I walked through the familiar hallways with my head high, even though every person I passed suddenly became very interested in their shoes. The silence was deafening. No welcome back. No. How are you feeling? Just uncomfortable avoidance and whispered conversations that stopped the moment I got too close. My old office, the corner space with the skyline view that I'd earned after bringing in the Morrison account, was now occupied by someone else. Through the glass walls, I could see a young man I didn't recognize sitting at what used to be my desk, talking animatedly on the phone. Derek was waiting for me near the kitchen, his expression somewhere between guilty and smug. "Lily, good to see you back. Robert wants to see you in his office right away." "I'm sure he does. Look, this is just business. Nothing personal." I stopped walking and looked directly at my cousin.
You took my job, Derek. My job.
After I got you hired. After I mentored you. After I defended you when you screwed up the Patterson presentation. And you're telling me it's not personal. He had the decency to look uncomfortable.
Robert made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
You would have done the same thing. No, I said quietly. I wouldn't have.
Because I know the difference between ambition and betrayal. I walked away before he could respond, my phone already recording audio in my pocket.
Sarah had taught me well. Document everything, trust no one, and never let them see you coming. Robert's office door was open. He was on a call, but he gestured for me to enter. I sat down and waited, watching him laugh with whoever was on the other end, completely ignoring my presence for a full 5 minutes. Classic power play, I'd seen it a dozen times. When he finally hung up, he didn't apologize for the wait. Lily, you're back. Feeling better? My doctor cleared me to return to work, yes. Good.
Well, we've had to make some changes while you were gone.
As you probably noticed, your position has been filled. Derek's been doing excellent work, and the clients love him.
So we're going to keep him in that role. I said nothing. Just waited, but we don't want to lose you entirely. You've been here a long time, and we value loyalty. So we've created a new position for you.
Facilities coordinator. Facilities coordinator. I repeated flatly.
It's an important role. Someone needs to make sure our workspace is maintained properly. Clean bathrooms, stock supplies, that sort of thing. The pay is obviously adjusted to match the responsibilities, $35,000 annually. Still better than unemployment, right? From $120,000 as Director of Client Relations to $35,000 as a janitor in my own company. Cleaning bathrooms I used to walk past on my way to close million-dollar deals. This was it, the moment Robert expected me to break down. To cry, to rage, to quit. Instead, I smiled. When do I start? Robert's confident expression faltered for just a second. What? When do I start? You said facilities need to be maintained. I assume you want me to begin today? He recovered quickly, that cruel smirk returning. Today works. There's a supply closet on the 3rd floor with everything you'll need. The executive bathrooms on this floor should be your first priority. We have important clients coming in at 2 p.m. Of course. I stood up. I'll get right on that. As I walked out of his office, I heard him chuckle. Probably calling someone to share the story of how he'd broken Lily Chen. How the mighty had fallen. How she'd accepted her humiliation without even a fight. What Robert didn't know was that my phone had recorded every word of that conversation. Every illegal detail of my demotion. Every piece of evidence Sarah needed to build a case that would end his career. The supply closet was exactly where he said it would be. I changed into the provided uniform, a gray maintenance jumpsuit that felt like sandpaper against my inflamed skin. I gathered the cleaning supplies and headed to the executive floor. James found me 20 minutes later, scrubbing a sink in the men's bathroom. His eyes were red. Lily, I'm so sorry. This is insane. This is illegal. You can't actually be doing this. It's temporary, I said quietly, checking to make sure we were alone. Trust me, James. I need you to keep your head down and your job secure. Can you do that? He nodded slowly. What are you planning? Just keep track of everything Robert does, every decision, every communication. Can you access the email server logs? James worked in IT before transitioning to client relations. He understood immediately. That's risky. I know. But Robert is getting sloppy. He thinks he's won. People who think they've won make mistakes. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Over the next week, I cleaned bathrooms. I stocked supplies. I emptied trash cans. And I documented everything. Every condescending comment from former colleagues. Every smirk from Robert when he passed me in the hallway. Every humiliating task one was assigned. But I also watched. And I listened. Corporate environments are funny things. People forget that janitors are invisible. They have conversations they shouldn't have in front of the help. They leave documents on their desks. They type passwords while maintenance staff are emptying their trash. On day 3, I overheard Robert on the phone in his office while I was cleaning the bathroom across the hall.
Oh. No, the Chun situation is handled. She's not going to be a problem. She's literally cleaning toilets now.
Even if she tries to sue, who's going to take seriously someone who accepted a janitorial position without complaint?
On day 5, I found a document in the printer that someone had forgotten to retrieve. It was an email chain between Robert and the head of HR, discussing how to manage the Lily Chen liability by documenting false performance issues retroactively. On day 7, Derek left his laptop unlocked when he went to lunch. I had 60 seconds. I used 58 of them to forward key emails to an encrypted address Sarah had set up for me.
Every piece of evidence. Every smoking gun. Every mistake Robert made because he thought I was defeated.
Sarah was building a case that would be airtight. But she needed one more thing. Proof that Robert's behavior was part of a pattern. That I wasn't his only victim.
That's when I started talking to the other women in the office. Not the executives. The assistants.
The coordinators.
The ones who'd been there for years but never got promoted. The ones who'd been passed over for raises.
The ones who'd been subjected to the same discriminatory comments I had. Turns out, Robert Mitchell had left a trail of victims. And they were tired of being silent. By the end of week 2, I had statements from 8 women. 8 separate accounts of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. 8 witnesses who were ready to speak up once they knew they wouldn't be alone.
Robert thought he was destroying me.
In reality, he was handing me the ammunition to destroy everything he'd built. On Friday afternoon, as I was emptying the trash in the conference room, I overheard Robert talking to Derek about their plans for a celebration dinner. We should toast to our success.
The Chun problem is solved, the clients are happy, and the board is impressed with our cost-cutting measures.
Life is good. I smiled as I tied up the trash bag. Life was about to get very interesting.
The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. Robert had been bragging about it all week. A presentation to the executive board about operational improvements and cost efficiency measures. He'd even practiced his speech in the conference room while I mopped the floors, completely oblivious to the fact that I was memorizing every word. What Robert didn't know was that Sarah had requested a meeting with the same board for 9:30 a.m.,
30 minutes before his victory lap.
I arrived at the office that morning wearing my maintenance uniform, just like I had for the past 3 weeks. Business as usual, nothing suspicious.
I clocked in, grabbed my cleaning cart, and headed toward the executive floor. At 9:15, Sarah walked through the front doors wearing a sharp navy suit and carrying a briefcase that contained 3 months of evidence. Behind her were 2 representatives from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and a lawyer from the Department of Labor. Maria, the receptionist, immediately called Robert's office. I watched from the supply closet as he emerged, confident and smiling, probably thinking this was some routine compliance check.
Mr. Mitchell, I'm Sarah Kim, representing Lily Chen. These are officials from the EEOC and DOL. We have a 9:30
meeting with the board of directors. Robert's smile froze.
I'm sorry, what is this regarding?
Systematic discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The board is expecting us. The color drained from Robert's face. This is highly irregular.
You can't just... We can, and we are. The board received our documentation package last night.
All 247 pages of it. I had to bite my lip to keep from smiling as I watched Robert's world start to crack. The board meeting lasted 2 hours.
I wasn't in the room, but James was. He'd been called in as a witness. He told me later that it was brutal.
Sarah presented everything.
The recordings of Robert's discriminatory comments. The destroyed medical documentation.
The text message about the bathroom cleaning assignment. The falsified performance reviews. The email chains proving premeditated retaliation.
Then came the statements from the 8 other women.
Each one detailing years of harassment, overlooked promotions, and hostile work environment incidents that HR had systematically ignored. And finally, the financial evidence. James had pulled the data showing that under my leadership, client relations had generated $15 million in new revenue.
Under Derek's leadership over the past 3 weeks, 2 major clients had already started pulling their accounts, representing a potential loss of $4.2 million. The board's faces, James said, went from skeptical to horrified to furious in the span of 90 minutes. At 11:30, Robert was escorted out of the building by security. Not to collect his belongings, those would be mailed to him. Not to say goodbye to anyone. Just out. Immediately. Permanently. I was cleaning the 3rd-floor bathroom when I heard the commotion. I stepped into the hallway just in time to see Robert being walked toward the elevators, his face red with rage and humiliation. Our eyes met. In that moment, he understood. Everything. The weeks of silent compliance. The acceptance of degrading work. The lack of resistance. It had all been strategy. I'd been gathering evidence while he'd been celebrating his victory. "You!" he hissed, trying to pull away from the security guards. "You set me up. You manipulated. I documented," I said calmly. "There's a difference. Every word you said, every action you took, that was all you, Robert. I just made sure there was a record of it." "This isn't over?" he snarled. "Actually, it is. You're done here. And based on what my lawyer filed this morning, you're probably done in this industry." Turns out, discrimination lawsuits tend to follow people around. The security guards pulled him into the elevator. The last thing I saw was his face shocked, defeated, finally understanding that he hadn't broken me. He'd underestimated me. And that mistake had cost him everything. 20 minutes later, I was called into the boardroom. The entire executive board was there. 9 people in expensive suits, all looking extremely uncomfortable. The chairman, Margaret Harding, spoke first. "Ms. Chun, on behalf of Sterling and Associates, I want to offer our most sincere apologies. What happened to you was unacceptable, illegal, and a complete failure of our leadership and HR systems." I said nothing. Just waited. "Robert Mitchell has been terminated effective immediately. We're also conducting a full review of HR procedures and management practices. Several other terminations may follow." "What about Derek Chun?" I asked. Margaret glanced at her notes. "Mr. Chen has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His involvement in this situation will be thoroughly examined." Good. Family or not, Derek had made his choice. "We'd like to offer you your position back," Margaret continued. "Full restoration of title, salary, and benefits, plus compensation for the wages you lost during this period. And we're prepared to discuss additional remedies for the harm you've suffered." "What about the other women who came forward?" Margaret looked impressed. "We're meeting with each of them individually. Those with legitimate grievances will be compensated and, where appropriate, promoted to positions they should have held years ago." I let the silence stretch. "Let them sweat a little. I'll need that offer in writing," I finally said. "Reviewed by my attorney. And I want a seat in every meeting where new management policies are discussed. This doesn't just get fixed with money." "The culture here needs to change." "Agreed," Margaret said immediately. "Completely agreed." As I walked out of that boardroom, I passed Derek in the hallway. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Lily, save it," I said, not stopping. "You had a choice. You chose wrong. Now you get to live with it." By 3 p.m., the story had spread through the entire office. The whispers in the hallways had a different tone now. Not pity, respect, maybe even a little fear. The woman they'd watched clean bathrooms for 3 weeks had just taken down a VP and exposed systematic corruption that went all the way to HR. If you're watching this and you've ever been told to just accept mistreatment, to keep your head down, to not make waves, remember this moment. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous one to cross. Subscribe to see how this story ends. That night, I went home to my apartment, the same modest 1-bedroom I'd been so worried about losing. I changed out of that gray maintenance uniform for the last time. I took a long shower, washing away 3 weeks of humiliation. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I slept peacefully. 6 months later, I was sitting in my restored office, the corner space with the skyline view, when James knocked on my door. "You're going to want to see this," he said, holding up his phone.
It was a news article.
Former VP Robert Mitchell sentenced in employment fraud case. The criminal investigation that followed his termination had uncovered something even Sarah hadn't expected.
Robert had been falsifying client billing records, inflating hours, and pocketing the difference. Over 3 years, he'd stolen nearly $800,000 from Sterling and Associates. The fraud charges came with real consequences: 18 months in federal prison, full restitution, a felony record that would follow him forever. His LinkedIn profile, once full of accomplishments and connections, had been deleted. His professional reputation was destroyed beyond repair. Simone, his wife of 12 years, had filed for divorce 2 weeks after his arrest. She'd released a public statement saying she had no knowledge of his criminal activities or his treatment of employees. Smart woman. She got out while she could still claim ignorance.
Karma moves slow,
James said. But when it hits hard. I thought about that text message Robert had sent me. The one about bathroom cleaning assignments. The smoking gun that had started everything. He'd been so arrogant, so certain of his power, that he'd put his cruelty in writing.
Pride really does come before the fall. Derek's story ended differently, but no less satisfying. The board's investigation revealed that he'd known about Robert's plan to demote me before it happened.
He'd actually helped coordinate it, thinking it would secure his own promotion. When that evidence came to light, Sterling and Associates terminated him immediately. He tried to find work at other firms, but our industry is smaller than people think. Word travels fast. No reputable company wanted to hire someone who'd betrayed family for a shortcut to success. Last I heard, he'd moved to Seattle and was working in sales for a tech startup.
A decent job, but nowhere near the trajectory he'd sacrificed his integrity to achieve. My mother stopped speaking to him entirely. At family gatherings, there's an empty chair where Derek used to sit.
That's the price of betrayal. You don't just lose a job. You lose the people who believed in you. As for me, the 6 months after Robert's termination were transformative.
Sterling and Associates didn't just restore my position, they promoted me.
I was named Senior Vice President of Client Relations, with a 40% salary increase and equity in the firm. The board wanted to make a statement that they valued talent, integrity, and resilience. My first major project was restructuring the entire HR department. We fired the director who'd ignored complaints for years and brought in
someone who actually understood that protecting employees protects the company.
We implemented new policies, mandatory training, and anonymous reporting systems.
The 8 women who'd come forward with their stories, 3 of them received overdue promotions. 2 accepted financial settlements and moved on to better opportunities. 3 stayed and became advocates for the culture change we were building.
The Morrison account, the one I'd brought in years ago, had nearly been lost under Derek's incompetent management.
I personally flew to Denver, met with their CEO, and explained what had happened, not to make excuses, but to be transparent.
They appreciated the honesty and renewed their contract.
$3 million in annual revenue saved. My lupus was better managed too.
With the stress of Robert's harassment gone, with proper rest and medical care, my flare-ups became less frequent.
I'd learned something important. Your health isn't separate from your environment. Toxic workplaces create toxic physical symptoms.
The legal settlement from Sterling and Associates was substantial enough that I paid off my student loans, helped my parents with their mortgage, and invested the rest. For the first time in my adult life, I had financial security that didn't depend on sacrificing my well-being.
But the real victory wasn't the money or the title. It was the morning I walked through the office and saw the new interns, 3 young women of color who'd been hired through our expanded diversity program. They looked at me with hope in their eyes, like I represented possibility instead of limitation.
It was the email I received from one of the 8 women, telling me that speaking up had changed her life. That she'd stopped accepting mistreatment as normal. That she'd found her voice. It was the day I testified before a congressional committee about workplace discrimination, turning my personal story into policy recommendations that could help thousands of people I'd never meet.
Robert Mitchell thought he was crushing me when he handed me that maintenance uniform.
He thought watching me clean bathrooms would prove his dominance. Instead, those 3 weeks of humiliation became the foundation of something he could never understand: real power.
Not the kind that comes from intimidation or cruelty, but the kind that comes from resilience, strategy, and refusing to accept injustice. Today, I mentor young professionals who face discrimination. I teach them what I learned the hard way. Document everything, find your allies, and understand that silence protects abusers while speaking up protects future victims. Robert Mitchell destroyed my doctor's note and told me that people like me don't get sick, we get lazy. He was wrong about everything. People like me don't break.
We document. We strategize. We wait for the right moment. And then we dismantle the systems that were designed to keep us down, piece by piece, until there's nothing left of the person who tried to destroy us. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's building a life so successful, so meaningful, so full of purpose that their attempt to break you becomes nothing more than a footnote in your success story. Robert is in prison. Derek is irrelevant. And I'm here, thriving, leading, making a difference. That's justice. Have you ever faced someone who tried to break you? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. And if this journey resonated with you, subscribe to the channel because every story of injustice deserves to become a story of triumph, and yours might be next.